Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mysterious Huntsman Show, the show where we explore strange encounters, hidden history, and lots of unexplained events. I'm your host, Paul, and you can find my show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major podcast platforms. Please like, follow, and subscribe to the show, and please reach out to me if you have a story of your own or you would like to be a guest on the show. Check out the links in the description, and you can also find me on all social media platforms. Now, let's get into tonight's show. Today on the show, I'm joined by Tony Angiola, a veteran UFO researcher, investigator, and writer with more than 3 decades of experience studying documented UFO cases and related phenomena. Tony's a former assistant state director for the Mutual UFO Network out of Virginia, and Tony is also widely known for his extensive research into the famous 1964 Socorro, New Mexico UFO case and his meticulous data-driven approach to investigation. With a background in information technology spanning over 30 years, Tony applies technical analysis to UFO research, focusing on witness testimony, physical evidence, radiation effects, electromagnetic disturbances, and reported propulsion characteristics. He's co-authored major research findings presented at UFO conferences across the country and has appeared as a guest expert on programs like Hangar 1, the UFO Files, and NASA's Unexplained Files. In this episode, we're going to dive into his decades of investigation, groundbreaking case research, and what the growing body of evidence may reveal about the UFO phenomenon. Let's welcome Tony into the show. Hey, Tony, welcome to the show, man. I'm so glad, so appreciative that you decided to come on the show and talk to us for a little bit.
Anytime.
And yeah, Katie Page told me about you a few weeks ago and the books that you had written and a lot of the work that you had done. And I just knew I had to have you on here. And I'm just grateful that you came on. And man, I'm just going to let you just start telling me a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of what you got started into this, or how you got started into this field.
Sure. It all started back in high school, really. I was, as a teenager, I was mostly into playing guitar, playing in bands, racing motocross. And on the last day of high school, my computer teacher says, "Tony, come here, I have something for you." And he hands me this book called Light Years by Gary Kinder. And he goes, "I think you'll like this." And I don't know why he would think that. I've never talked about anything UFO, paranormal, or anything in his class. Is just electronics and computer stuff. So during that summer, I decided to take a peek at this thing, and I was intrigued. I thought it was amazing. I had no idea who Billy Meyer was, and I didn't know that he was,
Oh, yeah.
he was putting up a hoax of any kind. So I was really, really into it. Started collecting all the books. Probably spent $1,000 getting all that material, and then I got into MUFON, and they said, "Well, that case has kind of been proven to be a hoax and we don't really support it," and all this kind of thing. And I was like, well, there's a lot more to this than just, those cases that are just so fantastic and they have so much. If it's too good to be true, what do they say? It probably is.
Yeah.
And so when I later learned through Ray Stanford, which we'll get into, what a real UFO is like, is when it really opened my eyes to the phenomena, and you just kind of go down this rabbit hole. So in the early, that was in the late 90s, and then in the early 2000s, I had a family, raising kids and all that kind of stuff, and you kind of put things on the back burner. And then when you finally get back to it, you get in deep into it, it just consumes you. So what happened with Socorro, in particular, the year was 2015. I was the assistant state director for MUFON, Virginia. Ben Moss was the chief field investigator. And we went to the Cherry Hill MUFON Symposium, Cherry Hill in New Jersey. And that's where we met. Or we first saw James Fox, and he was talking about this film he's putting together, and he was talking about Socorro. And Ben nudges me and he says, "Hey, I know, I got to talk to him. I know about this video that he's got to have for this film." I said, "Well, let's do that." So we talked to him. We made this promise that we really weren't sure if we could fulfill. He says, "Find me that video." And so Ben and I went on this trek trying to find this lost footage of Socorro, because allegedly it was this black and white 8mm film footage of people just traipsing around the place. And we couldn't find it. We had to call Winkler Productions, Harry Winkler's company, and they wanted thousands of dollars just to do some kind of recursive search for it. They would, there's no promise that they were going to find anything. So we said, well, that's not going to happen. We don't have thousands of dollars to spend on this, not even hundreds of dollars. So after a little while, somebody in MUFON got a hold of us and said, I have what you're looking for. And they sent us the
Wow.
VHS tapes. And so we sent that to James Fox. I don't know if he ever used it or not. And it's kind of like lowered expectations when you finally see something, you're kind of imagining things differently. Then you finally see it and you're like, is that all it was? It turned out it was Robert Stack talking on the show Sightings. And the name of the lady that had the footage was Elizabeth. Oh, I want to say Smart. Elizabeth Smart was her name, and it was her father who made the footage, and she found it in her attic, and it got on the Sightings, and that's what Ben saw. He was watching that episode of Elizabeth Smart on Sightings. Anyways, so we found the footage, and we went back subsequently to another Cherry Hill event a couple years later. But during that time, from 2015 to about 2018, we were notified by the head of MUFON because Ben and I wrote this article about it. And Ray Stanford, who was one of the APRO investigators, one of the main APRO investigators to be there because you had the Lorenzens there. They were investigating, and several other people, including J. Allen Hynek and Jerome Clark and people like this. But Ray Stanford kind of stood out because while he was there with Allen Hynek, in fact, Chavez didn't want Ray Stanford there. I guess he rubbed some people the wrong way, but Hynek wanted him there. He said, "Is that Ray Stanford? I've done work with him before. Let him come out." So he goes out to Ground Zero, and incidentally, Hynek didn't bring any tinctures or anything to collect evidence with, nothing to really even write with, from what I understand. Or, he had a Polaroid camera, which comes into play later. And while Ray was there, him and Lonnie Zamora, which I'll get into in a second for those who don't know the story, found something. So let me give you a bit of background about this story. So where I came from was IT, computer IT, motocross racing, playing, a guitar in bands, to investigating with MUFON, falling into the Socorro case because of Ray Stanford and James Fox, and then making 3 trips out to Ground Zero ourselves and doing our own investigation and finding people that once knew Lonnie Zamora. So Lonnie Zamora, he's the police officer in all this. Back in 1964, he was on random patrol in town, and we put our rental car, right where his car was on that day. And we just kind of recreated the whole event. What he didn't know at the time, because he didn't see the speeder that made him go chasing after this guy, about 5 o'clock is when reports from Albuquerque started coming in to the different police stations about something in the sky. So it was around 5:40 roughly when the speeder goes by Zamora and he starts chasing after him. And it's this little small town, local town. Everybody knows everybody. He kind of knew who the guy was. So he takes off after him. He's calling to Nep Lopez on the radio, telling him what he's doing. And no sooner does he do that, and he pulls out to the main road, that he sees this flame in the sky, like a conical, controlled flame, like coming out of he couldn't really see the craft because the sun and the reflection and, the white light, the reflection. All he saw was this flame. And he thought maybe this is a plane coming down of some sort. And it's low and it's roaring very, very loud. He's driving a brand new police car. And back in those days, 1964, it wasn't easy to get a new police car. So when we learned that he just abandoned the speeder and turned his car off road, as he's kind of triangulating where this thing's going down and where he needs to go to meet it. So he's off road, rocks, potholes. He's beating this brand new car up, and then there's this big hill he needs to get up because that's where this thing went down into this arroyo. It's kind of hidden from anything around there. It's kind of a little gully. So he takes his police car, halfway up, gets stuck, goes back down, guns it, gets a little bit higher, goes back down, gives it all it's got. He reaches the top. He's about 150 feet, maybe 200 feet from where he's going to end up. And what he sees at that point, he rolls his window down and he sees this egg-shaped looking ellipsoidal tilted on one side. We have an artist's rendition of it. And up here, this is where Lonnie's car is. And he sees this from about 150-foot distance, and he sees these 2 figures. One's by a bush, and the other one looks like it's looking underneath it. Lonnie doesn't see the ladder here, and he doesn't know about this door from where he's at right there. So he drives. When he rolls his window down, he sees these figures. One of them by the bush is surprised, and at that point we can deduce that that little figure told the other figure, "We got to get out of here. We've been spotted." So Lonnie has got to go behind this mountain right here, this little hill. So he loses sight of it because he has to come around like this to reach this point. So he loses sight of that for just about a minute, and he gets as close as 30 feet from the craft. And we know this because he told Ray Stanford exactly where he parked his car. And Ray Stanford, while he was there, measured it out with his feet several times, and it was about 35 feet. Project Blue Book, when people start to get into this case and they see that it's one of the 701 cases that remains unsolved, we'll find that there's misspellings. Blue Book just made up numbers, apparently. They were just saying that, oh, it's 300 feet away and things like this, and you never got any closer. They were known for just embellishing or just making stuff up or writing things down incorrectly, you know.
Yep.
So it was really interesting that, we were able to we actually videotaped Ray telling us this part of the story from his living room and how he stepped it out and everything. So anyways, Zamora is now 30 feet from this craft, and he pulls up and he's afraid that maybe someone's hurt. It could be an overturned car. He's really not sure. He knows it came from the sky. There's flames. He knows there's a dynamite shack out there that might blow up. He's really worried about that. So from where he is parked, and we found the dynamite shack footings in the flooring, and it was in perfect view from right where this craft was, where his police car was parked. And he gets out of his police car, and the first thing he hears is like a door slamming, like a submarine hatch, kind of dunk, dunk, and then latching. At this point, he's looking at the craft and he sees this symbol, this upside down V with 3 lines through it, which he gets on the radio and he says to Nep Lopez, he goes, un V invertido con 3 líneas para abajo, which is in Spanish, it's an inverted V with 3 lines through it. And there's a couple different variations of it, but when Lonnie was asked about this particular symbol, which there's a lot of contention about over the years, he drew it on a napkin, and or actually someone else drew it on a napkin, and they drew 3 different ones, and he picked the one with inverted V with the 3 lines through it. So at this point, he's walking towards the craft because he heard this door shut and the figures aren't there anymore. And as he's walking towards this thing, this blue flame comes out of the bottom of it, and it like a conical knife into the ground. And there's a creosote bush right beneath it. And to this day, the foot markings where this thing landed are still there. They're protected by these rocks, and there's pictures of those in there that I sent you that shows light being bent over the footings, which is indication of radiation. So as they're photographing, Ted V. Jordan is the state trooper who took the photographs, and the Air Force confiscated his film, and they said, oh, it's been damaged, it's irradiated. That's evidence. So by the time we got the classified stuff back, we had a file. I'll explain how we found it in these files later, but I'm looking at those pictures, and I said to Ray Stanford, I said, this looks like radiation. Looks like light is bending right in the frame, And he says, yeah, that's probably what it is. And there's fogging in there, you get fogging and light bending. So Lonnie, as he sees this roar coming out of this craft, this blue flame knifing into the ground, slices a creosote bush in half instantly, which would require a lot of heat, for some time. And it lifts off the ground. And as it's lifting off the ground, the feet, it's like a self-leveling device. The feet don't just come straight up. They kind of retract it out as they came in like that. And there's evidence of that in the ground. So this thing is roaring. He's afraid it's going to blow up. He doesn't know what this thing is. So he jumps on the ground, prone, covering his head like he was trained in the army. And this thing reaches about 20, 30 feet elevation. And all of a sudden the roar goes away. It's like it shifted engines. So one engine is for landing and taking off. Another engine is for hypersonic speed. And it was kind of like a high-pitched hum. And what he noticed was that as it's slowly moving away in a perfect vertical, maintaining its height, as it sped up, the frequency went up. Kind of like those old sci-fi movies, if you will. And it didn't go exactly over the dynamite shack. It was about, 30 feet offset to the side, avoiding it. And he's by his police car now, and he's getting on the radio, and he's calling for Chavez to show up. And Chavez, his partner, happens to show up just in time as this craft is reaching 45 degrees supersonic speed up into the sky. He sees this thing. He doesn't say anything. He goes to talk to Lonnie, and Lonnie's explaining. He's kind of excited, and he's a bit scared. He doesn't know what to make of this thing. He saw these little people, this roar, this flame, this thing's taken off in some unconventional way, and Chavez is trying to calm him down. They go down to look at the burning creosote bush where the evidence is, where the feet were and all this. And he says, I saw these little people, this craft. He's trying to describe what's happening. He says, I called Lopez back on the radio. He told him to look out the window, but he didn't know which window to tell him to look out of, because even though the police station's close by, when this thing took off, I think it was to the northwest towards the Perlite Mill. Here's the police station. Here's where it landed, and it went in this direction away. So Nep Lopez never would have been able to see it. Also, because it's in a gully, gullies tend to control the direction of sound. So if you have a populace over here and a gully over here, and the sound is refracting off of this side, like, in music, like in music rooms and sound rooms, the sound was bouncing off this way, so these people never would have heard it. But the
Right.
people over here heard it. There was over 100 people that claimed that they heard it that Ray interviewed out there. So it's not a one witness event as many people that first read about this think it is. And it's not the only time that it happened, because what we found out, after this, a couple days later, a very similar craft landed in La Madeira, not too far away. And it was there almost overnight, possibly doing repairs. We think that the reason these guys landed here is because one of them was looking underneath it, needed repairs. There were reports that we interviewed some people, and it's kind of hearsay because the original witnesses had passed away already, but people that knew those witnesses were telling us stories that they saw this thing in the past before this event happened, and things would be falling off of these objects. Lonnie Zamora's daughter, we interviewed her. She said that my dad said that there were some credit card looking size electronics falling off this thing, and he put one in his pocket, and their house was ransacked a couple weeks later. And she says they ripped through the walls where she thinks her father had hidden it, and they had confiscated it. But that's one of those kind of stories you don't have any proof about, but it comes from his daughter. So, and she said that her brother knows a lot more than she does, because Lonnie confided in him the most, but he's reluctant to speak about it.
Mm.
In fact, Lonnie Zamora would later talk to his priest. He was Catholic, out Catholic, and his priest said, "Look, either you stop talking about it, let this thing go away, or you tell the truth. You tell people what you saw, and leave it at that." So he chose that to talk about it, because harboring it was driving him crazy. And the more he talked about it, the crazier things got. It got to the point where kids and adults were making fun of him, calling him the spaceman or mocking him for what he saw. So he ended up quitting the police force because he was too much in the public eye. And then he ended up working at the gas station for a while, and then later he worked at the dump until he retired and then passed away. And so it's not, when there's some debunkers that said, oh, they did this for money, for attraction, to get tourism. To this day, there's no tourism really set up for this. And in fact, they even tried at one point to build a Socorro Day, where there was a mural that was going to be painted on the side of the wall with aliens with machine guns. And I thought that's kind of tacky. And then they built like a memorial to Lonnie Zamora, where they painted his face and everything on this, like, it was like a water dam or something over there. It's like there's a fake site, then there's a real site. And they built the fake site because they thought that everyone was going to come flocking down there and just ruin everything, but nobody really did. So those who are really serious, who go out to Socorro, will see both. They'll see the fake site for the tourists that never needed it, and then they can easily get to the ground zero where it actually is. It's still on private property. It's right next to there's a church nearby there, and we found when we were recreating Lonnie's path, we beat the heck out of our rental car trying to retrace the steps, and then we realized later we could have just parked at the church and walked over a hill, and we would be all right.
And from
So
just real quick, from all accounts or everything I've
yeah,
read about it, uh, Lonnie Zamora was a very reputable, very straight up, very honest guy. No
yeah,
joking around, no anything like that. And for him to be a police
no,
officer and to come out with a story like that, I mean, I'm a former police officer, and that's kind of the stuff that you don't talk about, because if you go to court and you have to get up on the witness stand, you if they're asking you like for whatever robberies, homicides, anything like that, they're asking you questions. They want to talk to a guy that has not seen a UFO landed in the desert with,
that's right.
and
Especially in 1964,
oh, especially,
that was
yeah,
very
absolutely,
taboo. You're just a nut job if you're going to say something like that.
yeah, absolutely,
Over the years, over the 20-year period, when sightings would interview him, there's only like a couple of interviews you'll find of him talking about it. And there's only a couple audio recordings from, I think it's KSRG radio, of him talking about it right after the event. He didn't really do much media at all. He didn't really want to talk about it much at all. Even his friends, if he met up with his friends, people just would say, look, don't talk to him about it. If he wants to talk about it, he'll bring it up. But for the most part, he chose not to talk about it after most of this had already happened and transpired. And he was working at the dump and just kind of wanted to be left alone, really. He had offers from all over the world, to do movies and shows and all that. And he just turned them all down. He only said yes to sightings a couple times, and that was about it.
I hate that for him. That
Yeah.
that that's rough.
And as you probably already know, like in Valençol, France, Maurice Massé encountered a similar craft. He was tending to his lavender fields, and he's out there early morning, standing by a tractor, smoking a cigarette, and he sees something in the distance he doesn't understand. He sees that ellipsoidal craft on three legs, and he goes around the back way, around the mountain to get closer because he sees these two figures, and he's getting closer and closer, and he's trying to figure out what they're doing. And I guess they're harvesting some lavender, these ETs. And one of them has like a wand type of instrument. When he says hello to them, they point this thing at him and he's just frozen in place, all but his eyes and breathing, really. And these two creatures get back in the craft and it takes off, and he's kind of left there motionless for some time until he regains his ability to move. And he suffered health effects for some time. I think for a year he couldn't sleep, and he had just all kinds of issues physiologically. And the area that they landed in lavender field didn't grow anything for like a decade, I think it was. So you start putting together a lot of these ellipsoidal shaped type craft, even to the modern day tic tac even. When
Yeah.
I first saw that, I was like, that looks awfully like the Socorro craft.
Or even
And then
the
there's always mhm.
I was going to say, even is it Jake Barber? I think is on a recovery team that actually, I guess has night vision or infrared. I guess some kind of video of him lifting an egg-shaped craft. But
I don't think I've seen that one.
yeah, it's. I think it was on. It was on a while back, maybe last year, early on. He came out with one of the videos with I forget the Australian journalist that Ross Coulthart.
What's Coulthard, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They came out on Newsmax or News Nation, I believe, and brought the video out where he's lifting an egg-shaped craft with his chopper as a
Oh yeah,
to,
the one with that looks like a tanker that's on underneath it. The
yeah,
with the I saw that one. Yeah,
yep, yep,
I didn't know what to make of that one.
yeah. I didn't either. I'm still not
It's
sure.
just usually stuff like that. I'm just kind of like, okay, I guess anything's possible.
Right, right.
I'm always more on the skeptical side of things, really.
Oh yeah,
But every now and then, something comes up that you can't explain. Especially the work that we were doing in the San Luis Valley with Snippy the horse, and like you were saying, the flashes you were seeing in the sky. Yeah, I was seeing those too with Katie, and I was like, I don't know what to make of that, but I can't explain it.
yeah. It's odd. I mean, like I said, people don't look up anymore. They're usually inside or they're on their devices, just staring at
That's
them. You
right.
you outside and you don't have light pollution. You get outside, you will see some strange stuff if you just look
Yeah,
up and pay attention a little more nowadays. Because
that's what it is.
there's a lot going on, and people are
Like
still.
you said, the moment you open yourself up to it, it's like, watch out.
Yeah, yeah, it seems to be the case. Hey, what I was going to ask you, you're talking about I guess maybe trace evidence or any kind of evidence that was there during the Socorro incident.
Yeah, so that's
Weren't
where
there
it gets really crazy.
there were depressions, weren't there in the
Yeah, not
ground?
only were there depressions, yeah, there was. They claimed, and we couldn't find evidence of this, but they claimed there's vitrified sand and like glass infusion in that area that someone took. I forget who. It might have been. I want to say it was Marilyn Stanscombe. She was on Project Blue Book, but it could have been somebody else's. Somebody's secretary may have. The rumor was that someone's secretary had taken that. But whether that happened or not is irrelevant in my opinion because there's enough other stuff. Besides the indentions in the ground and the burnt creosote bush, while Ray Stanford was there, Lonnie Zamora pointed out to this rock and says, right there, that rock right there, it looks like there's metal scrapings from the thing that landed. And then Alan Hynek says, yep, sure enough, that's probably what that is. And he just kind of walks away. While Ray Stanford was sitting there going, why aren't you picking this up? Why aren't you collecting this? So what he did is he said, he gets a little bit nefarious. He says, hey, you guys have an interview with the media. Let me drive you guys back to the police station. So he takes them back, and then he scurries right back over and he collects the rock and he puts it in a bag. And so and I have a picture of that in there for you of the rock that had this curled up metal
Okay.
from the foot scraping on the rock. And what's interesting about that is that he was going to have that analyzed by Goddard, Dr. Frankel, and the head of NICAP at the time, Dick Hall, was helping him with that. And Dick Hall goes to Corpus Christi, and Ray goes to hand him the rock, and I guess the wind must have blown, and they both saw the metal flake fly right off the rock into the ground. And they were spending days with
Oh
metal
no.
detectors in their hands trying to find it. The rock still had enough metal on it to scrape off, but the big piece had fallen off. And they spent a week looking for it, and they couldn't find it. So Dick Hall takes the sample that's left to Dr. Frankel at Goddard, and Ray says, tell them to leave me some of the sample that I can work with, but they didn't. They scraped it really, really clean. And Dr. Frankel's team got in trouble for doing the work because I guess the buzz in the office there in the lab was that this is from a UFO. And so their bosses got word of it and says, you are not going to spend time investigating this UFO made of material, you know. But it was too
Yeah.
late. They already did it. They already did the exam, the work. And they called up Ray and they said, he said, if this metal was used as a space traveling material, it would be a very good choice because it's a zinc iron alloy. And at the time, they didn't really, you know, they couldn't really pinpoint it on the charts around the world. Later they did, but the way that it was fused together, the way it was bonded together was kind of unusual and it was very pure. So Hynek, we have a video of Hynek saying to Ray that I believe that the first assessment was correct, that it's a piece of made material from a space traveling, you know, craft, and you know, to ignore all the other stuff where they're saying, oh, this is just standard, anybody can make this material. But back in 64, the purity of it and the way it was bonded together was unique. And all we have left right now is the rock, which is, Ben is still looking for the rock. Like, we used to know where he hid the rock. He had all this other stuff he had hidden in the house. And he, a quick side note, he became like a paleontologist, like a self-proclaimed paleontologist. He discovered the notosaur out of Maryland, and he was the only person to go on this walking trail and say, that's a fossil right there. People shouldn't be walking over this area. Turns out the entire Goddard parking lot was a fossil,
Wow.
and they destroyed it to make a parking lot. So the slab that he got, which was about, I want to say maybe 6 feet wide, 4 feet, in length, he was paid like I think something like $60,000 by Goddard to recreate it. So they have the original safely put away, and he recreated it with other materials with the same. He had to make all the same fossil footprints in it from the birds and the animals and the notosaurs and all this other kind of stuff. So that became his passion until he died. He wanted to get back to Socorro. He wanted to write another book. And we were always wondering when he was going to find the time. So that's why we wrote our book, because we could just see the time ticking away. And in fact, if anyone who gets this book, there's something special at the end of it that you won't find anywhere else, and that's the actual photograph of what landed in Socorro. See if I can find it here for you. I think I gave you a picture of it that you can use to put up there. So I sent you this photograph,
Perfect.
and this is Alan Hynek with his Polaroid taking a picture of the same thing Ray's taken of with an Argus C3 35 millimeter camera. Perlite Mill is in this direction, and the UFOs are hovering. Or these UFOs were hovering over here, and so
That's
this was
amazing.
something that we learned about in 2015, and Ray showed us the negative, and we looked at it through a loop, and we said, Ray, you gotta come out with this. And he says, not yet. I want to find Hynek's Polaroid so that I can have parallax and show it then. He goes, if I don't have time to find that photo, you can show this after I'm dead. That's what he said. And here we are.
My goodness. And well, what do you think Hynek's, thoughts on this were? I mean, what did he find most compelling, do you think, or or most difficult to explain?
You know, it's interesting because Hynek, he was hired by the Air Force to kind of be their go-to pundit guy. He was supposed to just figure out a solution and answer
Right.
swamp gas for just about everything. And this is the case that started to turn his mind, change his mind about the whole thing, the whole phenomenon. What's interesting is I think it was 67 that he mentioned the swamp gas event that he got in a lot of trouble for, and a lot of the locals um, got up in arms about it.
Yeah.
And this happened in 64, so this must have been brewing in his mind. And then after the swamp gas incident, he must have reflected back on Socorro, from what I understand, that really got him to look at this with a different lens. Incidentally, on the ground zero, there were little footprints that looked like kind of like hourglasses with these lines across it for traction. They were only like this big,
Hmm.
very small footprints for these little
Okay.
people. And the ladder marks that went into the ground, those could be seen as well. And I remember when we presented this in Florida, I think it was like in 2017, somebody in the audience said, why do they need a ladder if they're so advanced? And I thought that's a great question.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe some advanced tech just didn't have room to put a fancy exit or something,
Yeah.
but apparently they had a ladder.
Yeah, I know that there were several explanations about possible or what possibly happened or what he saw. There was a lot of the hoax were prevalent out there at the time. Everybody was coming up with what happened, the way he did it, or what he saw, or someone's pranking just him because he was pretty. I understand he was very tough on crime and speeders in the area. I even heard one time that someone was trying to just play a prank on him, but I
I
don't
heard a
know.
lot of those things too. What we found was that whenever he caught a lot of these young people, I think he would let them go with a warning if he didn't smell alcohol on them. I think what he was really tough on was drinking and driving and things like that. And then they were trying to say, "Oh, he was drinking at the bar." That didn't happen till after all this, when his life was already ruined.
Mm,
And if I was him, I'd be drinking too.
right. Right. But yeah, I mean, did he ever go into any detail of what these creatures or these occupants were wearing, or more detail of than just they were dressed in white jumpsuit? Were they wearing helmets or face masks or
Yeah, he
anything?
said that they were wearing like white coveralls, and he didn't really get the what he changed was he went from the terminology of figures to little people.
Okay.
That was the main variance. Other than that, they were all in white, had these tiny little shoes, tiny feet, and they had something covering like a helmet,
Okay.
and it was all in white. But with Valençol, France, it was a little bit different. He didn't describe them as white coveralls, but tight-fitting clothing. And in La Madeira, I don't think anybody saw any figures there. They just witnessed the craft that had landed in a large black vitrified area on the ground for a lot of high heat, localized high heat.
Yeah. That seems to be pretty prominent in a lot of these cases. It takes a lot of high heat to turn sand into glass.
For sure.
I mean,
Yeah,
really, really super high temperatures that most normal regular people just can't get their hands on that kind of heat. So it's just
that's
not,
right.
especially in 64.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah. And that was the same issue with the Snippy case and when it comes to technology. When I would mention that, not to get away from Socorro, but when we're talking about technology and what it takes to make that kind of high heat, for example, is the same kind of energy that would be required to make an incision on a horse that would leave a laser-like and a hardened leather that's not malleable. Like even in today's, when you go into laser surgeries today, it's the skin's left to be pink and pliable. Imagine if you had a laser that was so hot that it cauterized the skin to be hard as leather, like a saddle. And I
mm,
found that to be interesting too. There's no portable, type of laser with that kind of energy. Not then and not now that's portable, I don't think.
yeah, it
Unless
would
it's a
be massive.
nuclear.
It'd be like a large. It'd be on a truck. I mean, a flatbed truck.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
And
don't.
you remember how big computer systems used to be back in those days?
Right,
It's the
right, for
size of a
sure.
house.
Yeah, and man, I don't mind segueing into Snippy though. I was getting ready to ask you about some of that because a lot of the area, especially out there in the Southwest, there's a lot of cattle mutilations going on, and still are to this day. So, I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't mind I know I need to get my hands on the book. You wrote a book, Snippy the Horse, and cat about mutilations.
Yeah.
So, I would love
Like we were
to.
mentioning before we started the show, we were talking about how, Snippy was kind of like one of those kind of cases that you hear about it, you know very little about it, and you
Mhm.
kind of just let it go. You don't really
Yeah,
say, hey, that's something I want to really read about. I avoided the whole mutilation subject for the longest time. I just told myself that's not my bag. It's not. But now it's more than just the mutilations. You have UFOs, you have Bigfoot, you have mutilations, you have ghosts, you have everything coming together. And
right,
it's all this weird phenomena that you just can't pick one and exclude the others. When we got into the Snippy case was simply because we were out there with the King family who learned of Rocky Mountain Ranch. And at the time, we were thinking, we're just going to come out here and, learn a little bit about this horse. And we pretty much know everything already, is what we were thinking. But we knew nothing. The narrative was that, oh, it wasn't really Snippy, it was Lady. That's what we hear from everybody. If you go to the Watchtower, if you go talk to anybody who's into mutilations, you mention Snippy. Did you know that it was Lady? And that's the big thing, a name change. Like with Socorro, the symbol. It's like you're
right.
focusing on the wrong thing. It's not about the symbol on the Socorro craft, and it's not about the sex of the horse, but we found the truth because the opera files were finally discovered and presented to us. And what we found is that Lady is Snippy's mother. It's two different horses. Lady was 14 hands high, 1,200 pounds, and Snippy was a gelding colt. And the veterinarians called him a gelding. And I was like, I don't know what a gelding is. I had to look it up. A gelding is a male horse castrated less than 3 years old, or less than 4 years old. And I was like, well, let me think. If veterinarians are used to knowing the sex of the horse and they're calling it a gelding, then it's got to be that. The newspapers got it right. So for them to change the narrative later didn't make any sense to me. And then what was really compelling is that we found a picture of Lady and Sheba, these two other horses that were alive after Snippy's death. So how could Lady be the one that's dead if she's alive running around in the meadows and lives until the 80s or whatever? So this started to get intriguing. And the more we dug, the more we learned. There were like 17 key points that made this a complete anomaly. So first of all, The horse is missing on September 7th, 1967. It's not found until the 9th. Agnes King, who lives at the ranch with her son, Harry King, her husband, Coley King, passes away, I believe it was 1969 or 61 when he passes away. So Harry King has been taking care of all the stuff on the ranch, all these years. Agnes King on September 7th comes outside of her house and she sees this UFO above her house, shiny, about the size of a Volkswagen Bug, and it's flying towards Alamosa. But she didn't have her glasses on, so she didn't quite know how to describe it. But what else flies if it's not a helicopter or an airplane and hovering over your ranch house, It
Right.
can't be too
Right.
many things. But then so she says, well, Sheba and Lady came to feed and drink, but Snippy didn't show up on the 7th. You have to go look for him, tomorrow. And Harry King goes, okay. So the next day is the 8th. He's too busy. He doesn't have time. On the 9th, which is Saturday, now it's been raining for like a couple weeks. The ground's very wet. And a strange anomaly on this ranch is that the gates, all these big gates would just be found open. And there are several of them on the property. So he's looking for Snippy on Saturday in the morning. His truck gets stuck. He finally, gets it going again. Around hour 2, he comes back around near the ranch, about a quarter of a mile from the ranch house, and he finds this animal laying there in a strange way. You can't recognize it because it has no flesh from his shoulders all the way to the tip of his nose. There's just nothing there. It's just bone. Not just bone, it's bleached white bone, like it's been laying out there for 30 years, which is really unusual. And he found that kind of peculiar. Not one drop of blood anywhere. He's like, what kind of animal attacked this horse? There's not one drop of blood anywhere. And the bones look like they've been out here for 30 years. It's kind of weird. So he takes that information. He tells Agnes about it because Agnes feels that she should be the one to tell Nellie, who owns the horse. Nellie and Burl Lewis are the owners of the horse. And Burl has a business in Alamosa, so they mostly live there during the week. And on the weekends, they spend time at the cabin about 4 miles away from the ranch out there near Mount Blanca. So she gives the news to Nellie. They come out there on Sunday the 10th, and they're inspecting, and what they find, it gets even weirder. There are these puddles of green ooze like antifreeze, like all over around the horse. And one of the first 10 people to see the horse in this state, which we learned later, his name was Joe. And he says not only were there puddles of green ooze, but it looked like green butter, like a gelatinous green butter. That was kind of weird. But it gets even stranger. There are these 2 prints about 500 yards away from the horse of like a giant bird that pressed into the ground with these weird claws. And there's only 2 prints, so this thing had to come down and land and then flap away and take off again. No other prints but those 2. And then there are these round holes, just random all over the place, and some of them go around a bush, and some of them are in a straight line. And to me, that reminded me of a case in Florida near Witchy Watchie, Florida, Springs, Florida, where these round, straight, like 4 inches deep, symmetrical, really circular round holes. And then they find out later on that they're the roots of grass around the horse. The roots under the ground were irradiated, which is kind of strange. Not the
Yeah.
tops, but under
Interesting.
the ground. And then the radiation around the horse was greater than at the horse itself. So for 2 blocks away, the radiation was strong. And then near the horse, on the horse, was almost nothing, which is kind of weird. And then they found circular tracks where the horse was milling way over here, like 30 feet away from where he was found. And then they found the tracks of 3 horses running across the meadow from east to west, like they're being corralled, like this. And then when the 2 horses go back to the ranch house, Snippy's milling in a circle, but then he's found 30 feet away, as if he was picked up and dropped. So these are just the facts. You can infer what happens in between there. Were there balls of light? Because there were some people in town that were avid ghost hunters and UFO watchers at that time. They were at the cemetery, and that night they saw all these blue balls of light around the King Ranch. So I kind of inferred in the book, well, maybe these blue lights were corralling the horses, things like that. I mean, anything could have happened. I think it could have been some sort of technology that did it very quickly. Because as we learn, crop circles are made pretty fast. A
Right.
ball of light comes across a crop circle, and then you have this amazing design, right? So maybe there's some sort of technology in these balls of light that do these mutilations. Could it have been a mistake? Could it have been an ET in training? I don't know. Just things that you kind of throw out there when you're trying to look at all this stuff, trying to make sense of it all. And then it gets even stranger because animals, when an animal dies, like a deer, if anyone out there is a hunter, that these things are devoured within 24 to 48 hours. Animals just, you know, go after it. Nothing would go after this horse. When coyotes finally decided to try to nibble on its hide, on its rear end, all of a sudden they found a trail of blood all the way back to the den where these coyotes died of dysentery. Maggots would
Whoa.
die on the horse. Birds wouldn't touch this thing. By the time everyone was done investigating this, because let's face it, there was APRO, NICAP, civilians. There were 30 people at Ground Zero when Dr. Alschuler was cutting the skull open a week later. Dr. Alschuler, he had a personal interest in UFOs and stuff. He was working as a pathologist in Denver, and he had a wife and 3 kids. And on this one weekend, on a whim, when he learned about, what was happening in the valley, and he learned about the horse, he goes out there with his family, and he decides to go to the sand dunes to watch for UFOs. He ends up being there all night because he was watching strange lights all night. He gets caught by the sand dune police that learned he's a pathologist, and they make him a deal. They said, "Look, we got this horse over here. I want you to look at it, and we'll let this go. We won't mention your name or anything. You just come out here, take a look at this horse." So before you know it, people are on the phone, calling Don Richmond, head of APRO, and his wife, Alice Richmond, and NICAP, and Ken Steinmetz, and people from the college, from Adams State College. Next thing you know, you got 30 people there. And Dr. Alschuler says, if you're going to be here, there can be no photographs. I don't want my name, my photograph, anything about me to come out of this. So they all agreed because, I was asking the question, why weren't more photos taken? Why weren't there photos taken of the green ooze? They even found a tool, far away in a bush that Nellie poked with sticks, and it was leaking this green ooze. Why was that not checked out? Well, apparently all of this stuff was checked out. Samples were given to labs, to the Conan Committee, to the Air Force, and anything goes to the Air Force just disappears, as you know. All evidence just vanishes. But the labs that were local that were inspecting it said, there's nothing to see here. It's just, biodegradable material. And then Katie had an idea. She says, wouldn't that be pretty genius if these ETs thought of a way to make a biodegradable, simply some substance that's easily answered, that does nothing to see here. But if used in a certain way or mixed with something else, it becomes some kind of a laser tool or something like that. Who knows? All I know is that this chicken gizzard thing was found that had this green ooze in it. And Katie was thinking maybe if you use it right, it's like a laser or something. But there were just so many things going on. So when I mentioned the white bones, they only stayed bleached white for a few days, and then they turned bright pink. What the heck is that about?
Mm.
And a few days later, tar black, And the photos that we were looking at from the archives, the black material around the horse was not blood. It was just like this stuff. We don't really know what it was. It was just like this dark substance, and nobody really could answer that. We found that there were also impressions in the ground, like a 75-foot disc was pressing into the ground, making all the sand smooth as silk. And there were 5 other circles, 5 15-foot circles around that 75-foot circle. There were burn marks, like as if some sort of ball of light was hovering over the ground and just burning the space below it. And there were I think there were like 15 of those on the ground. That disc that allegedly, eventually took off and hovered away, sliced off 3 fence posts. So like it didn't get high enough to get over the fence posts. It just took them out. And Harry King described it as if like something cut through these fence posts like butter, and he had to replace them. And then I started thinking, like, why didn't you save those? We could analyze why would you, like, I have all these questions. Like, if this
Right.
happened, then that. If this, then that. Why didn't this happen after that? Why were more photographs not taken? Why didn't she save some of the material for posterity? Save some of the mane, save some of the ooze, just keep it for herself? Or, these are all retrospective type of questions. You have to remember what things were like back in those days, I guess, and the kind of the zeitgeist going on at the time. And it's kind of hard to answer those things.
Yeah, I doubt they were thinking about it the way we think about it now.
That's right.
It was a different time, and farmers are just straightforward, salt of the earth. They're doing their jobs. They're not thinking
Right.
about flights of fancy or reading comics or
Right.
And we were talking earlier. This is a lot like, this is an amazing case, and I've not heard of it, but we were talking earlier about how James Fox almost dismissed the Varginha case.
The Varginha, yeah.
Yeah, Varginha. Okay, I'll say it right.
I think it's yeah.
No, thank you. But yeah, he almost dismissed that, or he let it sit on a shelf for a while. Then he got back to it, and it's turning out to be a very big,
I think he's back there again. I think he's doing another film about it right now.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yep, I'm looking forward to that for sure. But yeah, man, this is an amazing case. Did you happen to send any pictures along with that? Because I can also
for Snippy?
Yeah.
I can send them to you.
If you
Yeah,
can, that'd be great. I
yeah,
can also add those after the fact till I
yeah,
learn to figure out this thing. So
for sure. There were so many. What's interesting about Snippy is that it wasn't once we got completely exhausted researching Snippy, it turned into all the cases around it before and after, just like Socorro, right? So with Snippy case, there was this hum that was always going around, and we kind of figured that some of the humming was coming from the sand dunes. When sand is rolling off with wind in a certain way, it creates like this vibration. But what people were reporting was a hum that you could feel in your bones, that would just make you feel like there's something going on beneath your feet. When that would happen, Harry King was felt like he was having a heart attack on this particular day, and Ben King shows up just to pay a visit. And his mother comes to the door and says, Ben, there's something wrong with your brother. He needs to go to the hospital. He's having a heart attack. So Ben says, well, you have, Candy's with you and she's sick. I can't leave you here. Well, that was her niece, Candy. She had like a migraine and she was having this humming, hearing the humming sound too. So he goes, let me go get Nellie. She's at the cabin. I'll be right back. And then she'll watch you while I take Harry to the hospital. So now the thing about this is that the ranch is not right off the road. Like you have this back then it wasn't even paved. It was just a dirt road, nice flattened dirt road. And you had to drive, a rough road, like like channels, tire channels. And if you go too far to one side and you hit a Chico brush, it'll pop your tire. So you couldn't go too fast from the main road to the ranch house. So he had to work his car just to get to the main road. As soon as he gets to that main road and he turns left to head north towards the cabin, he sees this ginormous orange, glowing, bright orange that would hurt your eyes. It was so bright, like almost neon orange. This craft is hovering in the sky there, and he's looking at it. And as he's driving, this thing's pacing with him. So he stops the car, and that thing stops. He speeds up again, it speeds up. So he stops again, he gets out of the car, and he goes to the fence line, because there's like a wooden fence there, and he's trying to get an idea as to what this thing is. As he's staring at it, he notes that his eyes, his retinas are burning, and he sees this blue dome-like light at the tail end of it, about 3 feet in diameter. And he has this weird sensation in his head that says, "Don't you like driving? Don't you just want to get in your car and drive and just relax?" And he says, "Yeah, I do." So he gets in his car and he just starts driving, just casually driving for like a few minutes or whatever. And he realizes, he snaps out of it. And he goes, "Oh my God, my brother's having a heart attack. I got to get him to the hospital." So he stops the car again, puts it in reverse, goes back about 200 feet, and he waits for the craft to come back and match him. So he's thinking, he's calculating. He goes, "My turn is so far up ahead. I got to beat this thing before it comes after me." So he thinks he's going to drag race this thing. So he puts it in drive and he punches it. And he's probably doing 70, 80 miles an hour on this dirt road. And those roads are kind of fishtaily, when you really start getting on it. And he's looking in the rearview mirror. The thing hasn't moved. He makes his turn to head up towards Mount Blanca, and this thing's coming at him kind of like at an angle. It doesn't turn to face him. It just kind of like glides at an angle towards him. So he gets kind of off the main path, if you will, kind of going up the mountain. And then he finally stops the car and he jumps out and he looks back and he sees this craft go past him. And then it just turns off like a light switch. Just vanishes like a light switch. So police officer Judy from the watchtower, is it Messing? I forgot his last name now. His last name. I'm sorry, Judy. Her son Larry was telling us the same kind of story, that in his police car, this blue thing was following, this blue light was following him, comes over his police car, lands in a field, and just turns off like a light, which I thought was interesting. So then after he gets Nellie and he takes Harry to the hospital, turns out he wasn't having a heart attack at all. That's the second time that he thought he was having a heart attack when he heard that humming sound, but no heart attack. And then there's Mrs. Blundell, who lives by the sand dunes, goes on a picnic with her husband and Ben King and his wife, and they're just sitting there, and all of a sudden this giant crescent-shaped craft comes over their head, goes up to about 300 feet, and just takes off. She's an artist, so she goes home and starts drawing this crescent-shaped UFO. She has a little shop 20 miles outside of Pagosa Springs, and she finishes the art somewhere in the springtime of, I want to say it was 68. And she brought it in just to show her friends. Some strange guys in her shop, a weird looking guy with a perfect complexion, like he's not from around here. He says to her, "I want to buy that painting with the sheep on it, and I also want that other one over there." And she didn't know what he meant. He was pointing at the UFO portrait. And she says, "Well, that's not for sale." He goes, "I'll pay you anything you want. How much do you want for?" She goes, "You can buy the one with the sheep on it for $750. No negotiation," which is a lot of money back then for that thing, even today. So he says, "I will take both paintings, but I don't have any Earth money. I'll have to come back in October. This is my first time to this planet," he says.
Wow.
So She kicks him out of the shop, and as he gets in his car, she writes down his license plates, an Arizona license plate. She sticks it in her metal lockbox. Doesn't think anything of it. She tells her friends this wacko was in here trying to, buy this stuff. I don't even know how he knew I had a UFO portrait. So October comes and goes. Everyone's like, "Hey, did that guy show up?" And she's like, "No, he didn't. He didn't come back." So now it's 1969, somewhere around spring, June, summertime, and she gets a call from the police. "You need to come down to your shop. There's a lot of blood everywhere." She's like, "Blood? What's going on?" She goes, "Well, someone broke the window. A lot of blood everywhere. We need you to come down." So she goes down there. Nothing's taken except for her metal lockbox, which had the license plate written down of that weird guy. So that was really
Mm,
peculiar. And then I started thinking, did they save any of this blood?
right.
You could have saved it, put it in a file, we could test it in the future. I'm sure back then they just kind of washed their hands like, "Oh, nothing to see here, nothing was stolen, clean it up. So I mean, I can't speak for the police in that area at that time, but, I kind of wish they had saved some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Then there's a story about Mrs. Haynes, and then what's really weird about this story when I put it in the book, one of the family members contacted us and said, "Look, I don't know what you guys are doing with this book because there's a split in the family. Like half of it likes the evidence and all the new stuff, and half likes the old story, and they don't want us messing with it." But she said to us, she goes, "That story about Mrs. Haynes, that one's real. I don't know about anything else," she says. And that's the one story that I thought was probably not real. So the story of Mrs. Haynes is that she wakes up in the middle of the night at 3 in the morning or so, and her dogs need to go to the bathroom. She goes, "I thought I'll let these dogs out. So she brings her dogs out. One of them goes running straight towards the end of her driveway, and at the end of her driveway is some giant 30-foot UFO just sitting there, and she's just staring at it, wondering what the heck this thing can be. Her other dog just sits next to her, and I think she had two dogs, is what it was. The dog that ran towards this UFO turns, goes around the house, and then comes back and sits with the other dog. And then she has this notion, don't you just want to go back to bed and go to sleep? And that reminded me of what Ben King was feeling, like this weird telepathic thing. So she says, "Yeah, I just want to go back to bed." She doesn't think to wake anybody up. She doesn't even want to tell anybody what's going on. She goes, "I'll just deal with it in the morning." She goes back inside, goes to bed. The next morning, she tells her husband and her family. They said, "You're out of your mind. You're crazy." She got pissed. She says, "I am not out of my mind." They all went out there to look. They couldn't find any evidence on the ground. And then she remembers, she goes, "Oh, yeah, I remember having this feeling. I just wanted to go back to bed and go to sleep and not worry about it."
Weird.
That's the story that everybody that she told her friends that somehow got back to me later. That's the real one. But I think they're all fascinating.
Yeah. Doesn't a lot of that sound like today what we call, well, as far as the hum,
Yeah.
I mean, voice to skull technology, or like what are the weapons that they can use nowadays
Like
that,
plasma ball technology.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can, the energy directed weapons, I think is what I'm trying
Energy
to think
directed
of.
weapons is too. Yeah, and the sonic ones today are really amazing from what I understand.
Yeah, they can send out a beam to put fear into people. They can make them sick, throw up on the battlefield. They can do all kind of
Yeah.
things. That kind of brings me. I know you authored another book. I think it's called Cosmic Secrets,
Yeah,
which
I
is
haven't
talking a lot
released
of
it yet. Yeah, that one's mostly about how I feel about disclosure, which I don't think is ever going to happen. I talk about all the
right.
compartmentalization and just there's so many. Some people will think right off the top of their head, they'll think, well, religion, that's a problem, economy, that's a problem. But there's way more than that. It's like this whole infrastructure, just we're talking about thousands of layers, not just one or two
Yeah, for
of
sure.
people's lives that would be destroyed, especially the intelligence community, and the lack of trust that the American public would have towards this government, and just things like
Yeah.
that.
What do you think? It's a big, broad question, but what do you think we're dealing with here? I mean, you've researched this a long time, and you've seen a
Yeah.
lot more than most. What do you think we're dealing with here?
You know what? In my honest opinion, I really think that we're dealing with a simulation theory. I think
Okay.
that we're born with no memory. We have to figure it out. Nobody gets a manual on what we're supposed to be doing here or where we came from or how many lives we've lived, if you want to, think of it in that way. But I feel like, we are just borrowing these bodies. We're just spawned in here and there's probably multiple agendas, I think. It could be multiple these, from across the cosmos, multiverses, if you will. Not to mention just our own local. I mean, we got Andromeda not too far away. We probably got, people coming from there. But then we have some old school thoughts that I was just reading about early 1900s, late 1800s, where people believed that every planet was had habitants and that the dumbest ones were on Mercury. and then Venus was a little bit smarter. Then there's Earth, and then the Jupiterians were the smartest ones, or something like that. I don't know, because maybe they're the biggest planet.
I'm not even
It's
going
just
to ask
interesting.
what's on Uranus. So
Yeah, I know, right?
it's like, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I don't know who was it that said. I think we are. I'm going to mess this up, but you think about we're a spiritual being having a human experience.
Right.
So it's that may be a lot of truth to that.
I think of that often because, I wake up every morning, I'm like, here we are again, we're still here, and we have to pay bills, and, we're trying to answer some of these hardest questions. That's what this all comes down to, really. I mean, it's one thing to just have an interest in UFOs or paranormal or Bigfoot or whatever, but at the end of the day, what are we really asking? We're asking, why are we here? And why is all this other stuff here? And what are we supposed to know? What are we not supposed to know? And why are we not supposed to know? And what does the government really know? And how deep does it go? Secret societies, what do they really know? How deep does that go? How does it all come together? And that's something Katie's working on right now with the Roswell body, is that she's putting together, funeral directors that are also 33rd degree Freemasons. Who else was
Mhm.
in that lodge? Ike Eisenhower was in there. Who else was in there? And you start putting all these dots together, and you just got to read between the lines, and it's like, is that what happened? Is that what happened behind the scene that we don't know about? We'll never know about. But you can infer by people's actions and what they're not telling you sometimes.
Oh yeah. I mean, look at our actual layout of the Washington D.C. I mean, it's and the whole area is just littered with
It's all Freemason. Yeah,
every bit of it. Our ancient Egyptology, the obelisks,
exactly.
it's just it's bizarre what all is going on.
In fact, when I first saw that pyramid, I said to myself, I'm like, this is for one guy to be buried in? Don't think so. And then when there were no inscriptions in there, it really denoted clues that it's a machine. And then I thought about the obelisks, and then I saw how many pyramids are around the whole world. When people say pyramids, you think of Egypt, but they're everywhere,
Everywhere.
and obelisks are everywhere. Those things look like antennas to me, or for transferring some kind of subtle energy or something,
Right.
some sort of communication possibly.
Yeah. I,
So there's so much we're gonna learn more about it. In fact, we're looking forward to this year's Snippy event because Dr. Shock is coming back, and it's so
okay.
much fun to talk to him about the Sphinx and the pyramids and what he's found lately.
Yeah. I personally think a lot of those cultures inherited all of this.
That's right.
Egyptians weren't there. I don't know if they really built it. I don't care what Zahi Hawass
Yeah.
says.
They just put their mark on it. They showed up like, you know what? It's here. It looks amazing. Let's put our mark on it.
Right, right. The same with maybe the Mayan temples, the
Exactly.
Aztec. I mean, it's really wild that it is completely 100% worldwide. Some of the similar structures that we have, and
That's
some of
right.
the similar origin stories, and some of the similar,
That's right.
like how we got here, and the star people, the seed people, the angels, demons, the underground ant people. It's just
Yeah.
in the Great Flood. I mean, it's
Every
just
continent on this planet has a similar story
they
if you
do.
look hard enough.
Yep, they sure do.
The caves they found in France recently that had remarkable depictions of star people and things like that. One of my favorite stories is the one in Japan about the young woman who came out of a strange looking boat, and she had like silks they couldn't explain, her clothing, and then she needed help pushing her craft back into the water, and it went underwater.
Wow. Okay, I
You
haven't
know.
heard that. That's amazing. Yeah, and
Yeah, I was digging into some older, really old cases.
well, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, especially with today. They're talking about these things or entities, whatever NHIs, whatever you want to call them, very well could come from our oceans or at least underground, which have access to
For
the
sure.
oceans. Man, that's pretty wild,
I'm
pretty
not
amazing.
100% sure that the entire Earth is hollow, but there's a strong possibility that parts of it can be hollowed out. Perhaps there's an entrance in Antarctica or at the true North Pole. There could be something underground, not the whole thing, but part of it, like the moon. The moon could also be some kind of base station or something there.
Yeah.
I was really surprised about Joe McMoneagle's remote viewing of large mountains like Shasta, and that he said there were like some sort of like uninhabited control centers down there waiting, just waiting, and he couldn't identify the computer systems or what he was seeing and stuff. I think about that often too. It's like at some point those things might get occupied.
Yeah, yeah. Man, there's Yeah, that's even another whole different tunnel or rabbit hole we can go down as remote viewing. I mean, there
Yeah,
for our government to recognize this and and the CIA working with this from back in the 60s, 50s, and 60s as well during Operation Paperclip and bringing everything in. Man, it's just I think you may be right. We may be in a simulation. I mean, they're throwing everything at us,
they're
and
throwing everything at us, and
everything.
nowadays it's like it's even with technology where it's at. I mean, think about AI where that's going, you know. That's becoming a part of everything. AI is gonna drive our cars. It's already doing it for Elon Musk, you know. It's a matter of time, you know. And I used to think negatively about AI, then I started thinking about it. You know what AI really is? It's a power tool. Back in the day when the first powered drills came out, I remember I got my dad one for Christmas and he was like not having it. He's like, I don't need these power tools. Real men use a screwdriver, and then next thing I know, he had nothing but power tools, you know, within a couple of
Right.
years. And that's all AI is. It's just a way of doing things faster if you learn how to use it properly. It's not. It might be a replacement for some jobs, just like power tools may have replaced some jobs,
Right.
but it also creates at the same time.
It does. It's ever evolving. I mean, and if you don't evolve with it, you're just gonna become a
That's it.
dinosaur.
That's
uh,
You don't want to be
unfortunately,
the guy without a power screwdriver.
no, don't be that guy. There's no telling where we're headed. I feel like something is definitely ramping up. The next year or 2 years, I think it's going to be very interesting, and I think we probably better get ready for it, whatever that
For
might be.
sure.
Whatever
Whatever
that,
that might be.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm not a full-blown prepper, but you know, it's like we do some prepping because you're thinking, I don't want to be left empty-handed, but it's, you know, we got enough ammo and stuff like this and some provisions, but you start really, really thinking about it. Your water gets taken away. Your electricity gets taken away.
right.
You know, no internet. That's what scares me the most.
I know a couple of weeks ago here in Nashville, we had pretty much a citywide or a middle Tennessee crippled event with the hard freeze we had, the freezing rain, the snow, and it shut everything down. Most probably 30, 40, 50,000 people lost power in
Wow.
Nashville and outer limits of Nashville. And it that hurt. That hurt a lot of people. And natural event that happened. You think about something that shuts the
Yeah.
entire grid down for months or anything, another Carrington event or
Oh, yeah.
anything, man, people are going to lose their minds after about 2 weeks of not eating,
Oh,
not
for
drinking
sure.
water.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to prepping at all. So
Right.
if
I'm
those
really
who
big
don't,
on, I love my Berkey water filter.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. What is it they say? Those who fail to prepare to fail. So
That's right.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm, I'm on board with that. So,
For sure.
but
And let's hope that if anything like that happens, it's just a temporary, you know, glitch. It's not going to be the
sure.
full blown, you know. I would
Yeah.
hate to live through that kind of travesty, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no clue. Like I said, if it's the AI coming to get us, maybe was it Skynet on Terminator? It could. Who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows? Yeah. I can't imagine even we recently watched Terminator 1 because it's been so long.
Oh
And
wow.
as low tech as that film was, it was still interestingly creepy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm from the '80s, man. I still watch only '80s stuff if I can help it because
That's all we do.
I love that time
Don't ask me
period.
about anything modern because we're behind.
No, and man, I forgot where I was going with that, but it's like, oh yeah,
80s shows, 80s movies.
it's almost like predictive programming. I mean, there's a lot coming to fruition, I guess, from I don't know if the people that wrote these things back in the day, Gene Roddenberry, Isaac Asimov, I mean, all these, I don't know if they wrote things that they were seeing that were coming,
Right.
or if they just wrote things that were brilliant, and then now we're like trying to push it along or imitate it.
You know what? Go back, start watching all the Star Wars again, and start thinking, where did Spielberg get that idea? You know, it's like that's a lot of the stuff we're seeing. Like whether, like with Katie, for example, she talks about the Tubi guy that was mentioned in her report back in the '70s, and to me, that's like that rings like tones of C-3PO, R2-D2,
Oh
or
yeah,
you know what I mean, like kind of stuff.
yeah. The
I was like,
sketch,
what? Yeah,
yeah,
like
the sketch she
what was
showed me was
Spielberg privy to?
yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. And think about Star Trek.
Oh yeah,
We never thought we would have the tricorders or that we would talk to people across the in Thailand just on a video
well, these
recorder.
smartphones of today are like a dream come true from my point of view when I was a kid.
Oh yeah,
Remember back in the day, Dick Tracy watches, you
yes,
know, can you imagine seeing a video that you can talk to back in, here we are.
yeah. Or the Jetsons. I remember sitting in class thinking, boy, when it gets 2020. We're gonna all have flying cars.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that was, we were sitting there thinking, what was the name of that robot's name? Oh, it was Rosie. We started singing the song. His boy Elroy, doo 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 doo, trying to
Yeah.
remember all their names. Mr. Splee.
Oh yeah. Great stuff. Yeah. We could make another whole show just on 80s references, I bet.
Well, that'd be great.
But no, man, Tony, thank you so much. I definitely, I know we have so much more to talk about, and I didn't want to keep you
Sure.
too long, but we will. There's another whole
There's
area.
again.
I
Yeah.
definitely want to do it again. I want to talk more about like more of the government cover up, or the secrecy, and maybe what could happen or occur if disclosure happened. But
Sure.
like, unlike you, I don't think it ever will.
Right. I mean, what I write mostly about in that book is when every time you see like a hearing, it's never official. Those people that you're seeing there that are in the government are being paid to be there as private citizens. It's a mock hearing. So people that are raising their hands and swearing on stuff, they're not swearing on anything because they're not being held accountable to anything they say.
Right.
We're still waiting on evidence that they
Yeah,
claim they have.
if you're a whistleblower, be a whistleblower. That
Yeah.
the whole
Go
point.
full throttle. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'll have to talk about that in a skiff. No, I mean,
That's right. Whenever I hear that, I cringe. I'm like,
yeah, yeah, and they're writing books.
yeah,
They're coming up with UFO cruises. Go with me on this cruise. We'll
exactly.
talk.
They become celebrities, and I write about that too. I'm like, if a whistleblower becomes a celebrity and they're selling all kinds of stuff, maybe that should be a red flag.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, again, I appreciate you coming on, and
Sure.
I will let you go. And hopefully, and tell Katie I said hello and thank her again for coming on the show a few weeks ago. Definitely, I think I'm going to try and get out to one of the symposiums at some point, or Contact in the Desert. I've never been. I really want to go to. I need to start going to some of these places. So,
For sure.
just to meet, with great minds like you guys and similar mindsets.
For sure. Everyone there is on the same page, more or less.
Well, yeah, that'd be nice. But because I'm in the South and not everybody here is on the same page anymore. So,
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
it's still a great place.
You're in dangerous waters over there still.
Oh yeah, I have to be careful. I'll be burned at the stake tomorrow. But no, thank you again, and I'm gonna let you go, and I'll sign us off here real quick.
Sounds great.
All right,
and I'll
guys.
send you those pictures for Snippy.
Oh, please do. And when I figure out how to put those in, I'm going to be editing the next day or two. And when I figure out how to put those guys in there, I will get those in there.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I tell you what, just hang out just a quick second, and
Sure.
I'll say goodbye to everyone. And again, everyone, thank you, Tony, for coming out. And thank you guys for listening to the Mysterious Huntsman Show. And you can find this on YouTube. You can listen to it on Spotify and all major platforms that you listen to your podcast. All right, that's it. That's a wrap on tonight's amazing show. And if you want to find out more information about Tony, check out his website, TonyAngiola.com. You can buy his books there and find more ways to connect. All right, guys. Next week, we're going to have another great show. I'm looking forward to my next guest, and we will talk to you soon.